Dr. L.K. Gupta, Chairman of INTACH, Sri Sanjeev Sanyal, who just made the keynote address of this valedictory session, Dr. Mishra, Dr. Saryu Joshi, other members of this August gathering, Namaskaram to all of you. I feel delighted and privileged to be present here to join all of you on this National Convenors Convention of the International Trust for Art and Cultural Heritage. This is a special occasion, being the 75th year of India's independence, Azadi Ka Amrit Mahotsav, which, and on this occasion, we having an excellent opportunity to reiterate our commitment to making India a global leader or a Vishwaguru. As it has been mentioned, I have a close association with INTACH, which is performing the task of protecting and conserving the vast heritage of this country, especially that part which is not being taken care of by the government also. It's gratifying to note that Major General Gupta as chairman and Mrs. Mishra as member secretary have led INTACH with distinction. INTACH has justified its existence in the last 4 decades by establishing a network of chapters across the country, by not only protecting the unprotected, but also those heritage sites that were facing extinction in the wake of development and urbanization. I am aware that various chapters of INTACH are manned by experts who have sacrificed better careers in academia or corporate world to work at no substantial income because of their commitment to the cause of heritage. It's an invaluable contribution, and their role in this endeavor is remarkable. Let me take this opportunity to congratulate all of you and the INTACH organization for its commitment to this stellar job. Friends, as you all are aware, heritage represents all aspects of our lives. It is interconnected through language, music, art, landscapes, and in our daily lives in a myriad manifestation. If one were to look at the major questions that independent India encountered and continues to encounter, they are in fact related to heritage. It happens because historically we were taught look at them through a peculiar frame which did not encompass the issues in its entirety, but tended to search for an illusory balance. One can understand this by looking at the diametrically opposite views taken by India's first president, Dr. Rajendra Prasad, and India's first Prime Minister, Jawaharlal Nehru, on whether the inauguration of the new Somnath temple should be done by the Rashtrapati or not. The reinstallation of the lingam of the desecrated Somnath temple was a decision of Sardar Patel, taken in consultation with Mahatma Gandhi, who insisted that it should be done only with funds collected from the public. Patel honored these views, but his death shifted the completion of this task to the shoulders of K.M. Munshi, who was also a cabinet minister at that time. Jawaharlal Nehru was not very much pleased with Munshi associated with this project. Matters came to a head when Nehru wrote to Rajendra Prasad of his disagreement with Rajan Babu attending the inauguration, and also warning him of the many implications of such a visit without specifying what exactly they were. Rajendra Prasad's reply to this issue was contained in his speech at the inauguration, wherein he stated, and I quote, "Physical symbols of our civilization may be destroyed, but no arms, army, or king could destroy the bond that the people had with their culture and faith. Till that bond remained, the civilization would survive." Unquote. To Rajendra Prasad, Somnath was the symbol of the economic and spiritual prosperity of ancient India. And to him, the rebuilding of Somnath will not be complete till India attains the prosperity of the Esther years. The disagreement, even bordering intolerance, shown by the then government to the Rashtrapatiji's presence at Somnath persisted for decades and encouraged the development of an approach to heritage that deliberately refused to identify itself with the ethos of India and its living traditions for the sake of maintaining adherence to an abstract notion of correctness. This tendency continued during the last 6 decades of India's independence. Heritage became a subject of balance. The protection, preservation, and conservation of heritage was linked with secularism. I don't understand what secularism has to do with the preservation and conservation of heritage. But that was the situation. So those entrusted with this responsibility were advised to maintain a balance between various religions. By the definition offered at UNESCO, and I quote, "Heritage is our legacy from the past, what we live with today, and what we pass on to future generations. Our cultural and natural heritage are both irreplaceable sources of life and inspiration." Unquote. I was, I had the opportunity to visit Machu Picchu in Peru. When I went there, the people who were there, who were associated with that, the guides, they showed me the exquisite preservations that they have made, which is centuries old. They said that our forefathers worshipped these, the sun, the nature, and till the Spaniards attacked us. And everything was subjugated. Of course, they don't now worship sun as a god. But they have no hesitation, they don't shy in preserving that and in showcasing it to the entire world. Anybody who visits Peru, he is taken around, he is shown their heritage, their history, their past, even though they don't consider it as a place of worship. Unfortunately, in our country during the last initial days of our independent India, something else was happening. So if one were to make an assessment of our heritage, including our intangible assets such as our Vedas, Upanishads, Ramayana, Mahabharata, and the literature of our great saints, saint poets, we realize that the administrations which adhered to the metrics of balance did a great injustice to our intangible assets. As our proclaimed secularism, self-proclaimed liberal dispensations ignored our heritage, there are several examples in the world where those heritage sites which were linked with the then living methods, living styles, the beliefs have been protected and preserved. Just now, Sanjeev Sanyal was explaining the Southeast Asian part of the world where the India had a link, trade and cultural link. We know several places in Southeast Asia that were under Indian influence through India's trade, cultural, and political relations. Our beliefs and practices became integral to local polity, culture, and religions throughout Southeast Asia. Ultimately, Buddhism prevailed in the region. But Hindu temples, as he mentioned, the largest temples, the biggest temples, they are in those countries. The architecture, statuary, all these have been preserved. The Prambanan temple and mother temple of Besaik in Bali, Indonesia, Angkor Wat in Cambodia, Pashupatinath temple in Nepal, and Maisan sanctuary in Vietnam. All these are few of them. Indonesia is a Islamic country, but they have Ganesh on their rupee, on their note, currency. We have in Southeast Asia, many, recently a foreign minister who came from there. He went through my biodata and then came to know that I had some connection with Sanskrit. So he asked me, do you know Sanskrit? How much do you know Sanskrit? Is there an opportunity for me to learn Sanskrit? So this is the link that they would like to have. In a way, they are not ashamed of their heritage. Recently, Thailand released a remarkable new edition of stamps, which depicts the Hindu deities. But unfortunately, our approach has been undermined. Our heritage gets undermined, which is a treasure trove of ancient civilizational values and ethos. A variety of forces threaten the preservation, restoration, and protection of heritage. Normally, aspects such as globalization, the market economy, and politics of the state influence it. In our case, a colonial mindset that saw Indian traditions and our way of life as inferior to others was the main reason we as a nation have lost an opportunity to cherish our heritage and learn from it. When the present government led by Sri Narendra Modi assumed office in 2014, it inherited an irrelevant suitcase of thinking and policy with respect to heritage. Truth and fact in our history were sacrificed at the altar of political correctness. The new government assumed office prepared to call a spade, and in no other field have facts and history been so concealed and camouflaged as it has happened in heritage over the years. Some recent incidents of some of them which has been explained in depth by Mr. Sanyal, where a correction has been made, are classic examples. The recent decision, when the Prime Minister commissioned the INS Vikrant, the decision to change the naval ensign from the cross of St. George to Chhatrapati Shivaji's emblem, the change of name from Rajpath to Kartavyapath, the installation of the statue of Netaji Subhash Chandra Bose in the center of the political power in Delhi, in India. These are all few examples and corrected historical wrongs. Of course, there are critics and the so-called intelligentsia who identify with the language and symbols of people far distant from their own and view their past as barren. It was the attitude of this class which made Prime Minister Modi mention from the ramparts of the Red Fort that we must strive to remove every vestige of colonialism. And that is the task for the next 25 years when India will be inching towards the centenary of India's independence. Friends, it was this government led by Prime Minister Sri Narendra Modi for the first time in 2021 decided to observe August 14th as Partition Horrors Remembrance Day. The partition of India is a fact of history. But the establishments that ruled India for a majority time has been denying this fact of history. The sufferings undergone by the victims of partition are part of our heritage and need to be documented for the future. Yet, till the present government assumed office, no one was ready to face the fact of partition squarely in the face. I had the opportunity to visit many of the African countries where people in much larger number got massacred. And people and the present governments, even though they may not say make a judgment on that, whether this was right or wrong, but it's preserved. That history that is there for everyone to see, understand, view, make an assessment. So it's not the question of whether partition was right or wrong or who was responsible for it, but the massive changes partition brought about in the lives of ordinary people who were shifted out of their homelands and made refugees overnight. It needs to be recorded. See, in Kerala, I come from Kerala, and there is a question 2021, when the 100th year of what is popularly known as the Moplar Revolt in Malabar was being observed. The jury is still out on the question of whether it was an uprising against the British rule, whether it was a peasant revolt of landless laborers against landlords, or whether it was an organized group attacking their property and places of worship of an unorganized group who were not prepared for such attacks. Who was responsible for the huge loss of lives as a result of it? Were the British responsible for ruthlessly suppressing it? The lines from the poem of a well-known Malayalam poet, Kumaran Ashan, who had traveled to Malabar to get first-hand information on what happened there, were quoted repeatedly. Similarly, letters written by Dr. Annie Besant were quoted. The mainstream version of the Moplar Revolt was seriously challenged, and with evidence during this centenary year, which only indicates that we still are not able to arrive at definite conclusions about it. Similar is the case of Tipu Sultan's invasion of Malabar. Friends, India is witnessing a cultural sort of reinvention. And I must say that the Prime Minister is leading from the front. Government has been laying great emphasis on the conservation, restoration and preservation of our heritage, crafts, arts and culture. Heritage has been dealt in the past by those governments which wanted to link secularism with heritage conservation. The present government is changing that by breaking this bias, treating heritage as heritage and unapologetically. There is nothing to be apologetic about heritage. In 2015, it launched Hriday, Heritage Cities Development and Augmentation Yojana, to facilitate inclusive development by merging urban planning and heritage conservation. It was done in a mission mode and completed in 2019. Similarly, the Prasad scheme was launched by the government for the welfare, for the development of religious and spiritual centers, and the main beneficiaries were cultural and heritage precincts. Government is bringing Kashi's historical heritage to the fore. Kashi Vishwanath corridor has been reviving the historical temples of Kashi and giving them a new lease of life. After a wait of over 100 years, an 18th century idol of goddess Annapurna returned to Banaras. It was stolen from Kashi and illegally taken to Canada. In a historic move, 29 antiquities have been returned to India by Australia. These antiquities came from different periods, with the earliest ones said to be dating back to 9th and 10th century BC. Over 157 artifacts and antiquities from the US, a diverse set dating back to 10th to 12th century BC, that also has been restored back. Ayodhya getting its glory back, the rebuilding of Sri Ram temple, heralding in a new phase of development of the ancient city. The work is in full swing on the Char Dham Road project. The new education policy proposes two ambitious objects which were rooted in Indian heritage. One, Mission Nalanda, which is to create 100 world-class research universities and 500 teaching universities by 2030. Second, Mission Tarshila, which is to have at least one high-quality higher education institution in each district. I must say, these are all several objectives and intents that INTACH has in its vision, which are being executed by the present government. But there is still plenty of unfinished work, as our heritage is very vast, and any organization how big it may be, will find it difficult to catch up with such vastness. And the pace which our heritage is disappearing, because we don't have a sense, perhaps a very little sense of history. And that heritage is disappearing, which calls for urgent action. Much has been done by INTACH, but much more remains to be done. And I am sure that INTACH will rise to the occasion. It's a privilege for me to be a member of INTACH. Heritage is an area of interest for me. My hometown Tellicherry in Kannur district, often in the news for wrong reasons, gets positive publicity when it comes to heritage, for there is much of it lying around and plenty of scope for INTACH. Friends, heritage is India's soft power. The government has been focusing on building bridges with the rest of the world, not only through the diaspora, but through soft power also. And heritage is one major part of that, integral part of that soft power, as important as military power, and how we use this, or economic power in the present generation, and how we use this power determines our primacy in today's world. It was this recognition which made Prime Minister Narendra Modi visit UNESCO headquarters in Paris soon after becoming the Prime Minister, and also for taking steps ensuring the return of artifacts smuggled out of our country. I hope attendance of this convention has inspired the conveners of various chapters to exchange ideas, learn from each other's experiences, and motivate them to redouble their efforts to the cause of heritage. We are at a crucial time of the Amrit Kal, an extraordinary phase in our lifetime, as illustrated by Honorable Prime Minister Sri Narendra Modi ji on Independence Day a fortnight ago. Our aspirational society has waited for a long time, and we must use this golden opportunity to fulfill the aspirations of our nation by contributing in the best way possible forward to supplement the government's efforts. We as individuals, as civil society, and as government have a unique opportunity to reshape our future, where India's vibrant democracy transforms itself into a global leader, as strong and self-reliant nation. And let's all pledge ourselves to be part of that great effort. With these words, I conclude. Namaskar. Jai Hind.